Welcome to DBC. Today we are finishing with solution-focused brief therapy. The meat of the book is done, and today we're going to talk just about a little bit of quick analysis. I'll give you 2 concerns and 4 positives that I took from the book overall, and then we'll finish with the epilogue of the book, which is actually entitled The Parable of the Nomads, which is a really cool metaphor that's at the end of the book. Awesome. So we'll hop into my concerns. Throughout the book, several of the transcripts from client interactions very much focus on question, answer, question from therapist, answer from client, question from therapist, answer from client, back and forth, back and forth. And if we are to believe what we've learned earlier about motivational interviewing, is that this process puts the client in a very passive and responsive role. So I'm wondering what the authors here would feel about a motivational interviewing style or technique or practice of using client reflections to build conversational momentum. I'm sure they could speak to that, but they don't in this book. So that's one question that I had about it. The second one I had is what to do when there is a client whose miracle or what they're seeking is fundamentally, let's say, unhealthy or immoral. And they do a lot of really cool work with getting to the client's actual wishes. With, for example, when the client's like, "Oh, what would be the miracle question would be, oh, my social worker would just stop harassing me." So when you want someone else's behavior to change, the reply is then, what are they seeing that lets them know that they can change and, let's say, ease off of your back or whatever the case may be. So I'm guessing that they would have equally something else to say about that. Maybe there can be a values hierarchy. Let's say somebody has, like, they just want to go back to being able to use drugs and be responsible with it, let's say with their drug addiction. And you can do a values hierarchy questioning. And what would you notice? What would be different? Maybe difference questions there. What would be different, or what would you get out of that? And they would talk about feeling well, and then you could ask them if the feeling well is really what they want, or if it's the drug use. So a lot more to be unpacked there. My 4 biggest takeaways from the book was obviously the solution-focused nature. This is my first exposure to this philosophy or this way of working. And back to the first chapter and even introduction of the idea of, are we problem solving or are we solution building? And they sound like the same thing, but really it depends. Are you starting where you are and focusing on problems, or are you starting where you want to be? Really cool, because my personal impulse, I notice myself when I'm interacting with people, is to ask problem-focused questions. And again, the idea there is that whatever you focus on, you're going to get more of. So if you focus and dig into the problems and the trauma and the whys, you're just kind of digging a pile of shit for yourself. But if you focus on the positive, not even just the positive, but like the intended outcome, that's really a powerful move. It was obviously cornerstone of the book. Number 2 are the 4 types of questions, which again were questions about exceptions, the idea of scaling, questions about difference, and then questions about relationships. Especially scaling, particularly the idea of the number 10 being always the ideal state. And my question is, when assessing suicidality, I've been trained to ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is that you're imminently going to hurt yourself, and that 1 is that you have no thoughts of hurting yourself at all, where would you place yourself? So in that traditional assessment, 10 is the worst case scenario, and 1 would be, I guess, the ideal. So I wonder what would happen in a suicidality assessment if you were to switch those and say that 10 means that you're feeling great about your life and you're looking forward to your future, and then a 1 would be that you imminently want to end your life. Just curious how that would be unpacked, which I'm not yet qualified to answer that one. So the idea of differences we talked about just a second ago, with what will they be noticing, what differences will they be seeing to let them know that they can act differently. And the idea of the clients being relational. And so I thought it was really cool, the idea, even throwing in dogs or infants, but what things will your significant other or your infant be noticing on your miracle day that you would know that something's different. Really cool. And then, of course, the miracle, again, which is that there's significant non-natural change that happens, that the problem that has brought you here has been solved. It happens in a familiar place tonight, which is where you live. You're not aware of it, and that you're actively discovering it is an awesome sort of using the what if frame from other modalities. Really cool and powerful, and that's probably the one thing that people would mention to you if you mentioned solution focused brief therapy. Be like, oh, the miracle question, right? But just to dig into the reasons why everything that is there is there. So a few concerns, a few really cool positives. I'd like to see maybe a little bit more research that was done on solution focused brief therapy, coming from motivational interviewing, where there's just tons and tons of research and bibliography, and people really picked it up, study it. However, okay, so that's the end of the book. And then the actual end of the book is the prologue, which is entitled The Parable of the Nomads. And once I saw that Yvonne Dolan, which is one of the two authors of the book, was an ERICKSONIAN therapist using hypnotherapy, I was really excited. I'm like, oh, there's got to be something cool. And I saw there was a parable at the end, a metaphor. I was like, awesome. Let's see what she has to say. And it, of course, has nothing to do with anything in the book. And I think that you'll enjoy it anyways. And it goes a little something like this. This is kind of a condensed version. Is that a long time ago in a land far away, there were a group of nomads that were searching for the promised land. They wandered throughout the Land of Khaos, and that's chaos spelled Khaos, for years on their search for the promised land. One evening, one of the nomads discovered that eating black licorice helped his sore feet and his tired muscles to feel much better. As a consequence of that, many nomads began to regularly eat the black licorice until one day, another nomad discovered that the black licorice was actually toxic, and its toxic effect was that it resulted in a loss of motivation to reach the promised land at all. Other nomads claimed that the medicinal benefits of the licorice far outweighed any downsides. Eventually, the residents of the Land of Khaos began to criticize the nomads and insisted that the Chaos Enforcement Department, or KED for short, move the nomads along, which they did. And eventually the nomads approached a mountain ridge, and they met there the mountain experts who resided near the ridge. The experts had devised a method of helping nomads cross the divide and enter the promised land by blowing up the mountains. And the experts were adamant that anyone that they worked with to pass through the mountains could not eat licorice under any circumstances. It worked for some, but their methods seemed too harsh for many of the nomads who wondered about the ecological impact of destroying the mountains. The nomads met another group of people as well, who were called the mountain pioneers, who had formerly been mountain experts and discovered actually a magic telescope that they used to find the tools nomads needed to investigate the mountains without blowing them up, and it worked frequently. But some nomads still felt like this magic telescope was intrusive, and that the mountain pioneers were invasive when looking through the nomads' things for their tools that would help them through the mountain ridge into the promised land. One day, one of the mountain pioneers, named the Curious Wizard, noticed a button with the letters PL written on it on the telescope. Most others believed the button to be unimportant, but the Curious Wizard noticed that when he pushed the button and looked through the telescope all over the Land of Khaos, it appeared just like the Promised Land. Of course, the Curious Wizard was mocked by many of the mountain pioneers and most of the mountain experts for his use of this button. One day, while the Curious Wizard was on a walk, one of the nomads walked up to him and was talking with him and telling him that he was feeling really good and he felt like he was about to find his tool to get through the mountains and he was ready to go to the Promised Land. He was packing up his belongings in preparation to leave. The next day, this nomad came carrying a heavy sack and ran into the Curious Wizard again. Before leaving, the nomad told the Curious Wizard that he actually wouldn't be needing the sack and that the Curious Wizard should keep it and give it to someone else who may need it because he wouldn't be needing it in the Promised Land. The nomad quickly scaled his way through the mountains and into the Promised Land. After he was out of view, the Curious Wizard stood standing in awe. He opened the sack and discovered that it was full of black licorice. Wow, he thought. We hadn't even talked about licorice. How did he know? As the years passed and the nomads continued to arrive to the mountain ridge, the mountain experts, the mountain pioneers, and the Curious Wizard all continued to do their things. When one day, a nomad approached the Curious Wizard, asking, "You use the same miracle telescope that the others use. Why do your nomads get such different results?" To which the curious wizard replied, "It is not the telescope that holds the power, but it is the view from within the lens. Without the view of the promised land, nomads would never pack